Hey, deserving listeners, Natalia Grace.
Maybe early 2011. I can feel the tension in the air. Walking into the house, I see my wife. I'll try to be as accurate as I can. Get one of the guys to point the camera at the floor.
There's something kind of interesting the way that he talks. I don't know what to say about it, and of course we can't determine someone's personality by the way that they talk, but there's a performative nature to the way that he talks. I've met people like this, and certainly there's nothing wrong with people like this. They can be wonderful people, but there's a certain way that they present things. It's, I don't know if I want to say histrionic, and I don't know what that says. It could point to some level of deception. It could point to just the way that he and his family talk about things. You know, you'll see families that tell stories in a certain way. It could be that he is really trying to convince the viewers of things because he's in a tight spot. There's a lot at stake for him. There's the allegations online. There's the allegations legally. There's the ongoing feud between him and his ex-wife. And it looks like we're never going to be able to hear from the ex-wife, from the mom, Christine.
I need right here-ish to get you to understand.
It's hard to have a lot of confidence about the truthfulness, the veracity of what he's saying here. There's a lot at stake for him. He is going through an ongoing feud with his ex-wife. His ex-wife, according to him, has influenced his two sons. He doesn't have contact. He hasn't had contact with two of his children for 8 years because of the divorce. So, or at least that's the narrative. I guess another option is because of him. So we just can't really, I think he's about to demonstrate some sort of altercation or something. So it's just hard to know. It could all just, I mean, if you've been through something like this, if you've been close to people as they go through something like this, you know. If you haven't been through something like that, or you don't know anyone who's been through something like that, then you might not know that when people go through divorces, especially if they're very contentious, they will not only knowingly just lie because they feel justified, but they will invent whole new memories. Whenever I'm watching stuff like this, I'm always waiting, and I want to. I'm waiting for that moment where I could be like, oh, okay. I suppose if we hear from the son, the oldest son, Jacob, because if he were to provide his account, that's similar to Michael's, and he already has to some extent, but also he's living with the dad, and he could just be concerned about not having the same story as him.
The beatings were similar to this.
I mean, just so many things to say. One, wow, just if that's true, my God, just horrible. If true, that really does change my list of hypotheses at the top of the list. If the mom, I mean, I don't know how much upper body strength the mom has, but Natalia is tiny. And this is an account of when Natalia would have been, I think, 5, 6, 7 years old. And you have an adult, a grown woman who is beating repeatedly as hard as she can. You would think that it might even kill Natalia. I mean, the way that he's, depicting this, you would think that if Christine had done this even once, that you couldn't hide the wounds, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I would have an easier time believing if it wasn't this severe. Not to say that this didn't actually happen. It could have happened. I don't know, though. I mean, what do you think? And then you think what sort of trauma he's exercising right now. It seems more than just him trying to describe something. There seems to be something else going on for him. Now, if any parent or anybody witnessed that, particularly a parent, that's going to be traumatic, and you might have some pent-up energy around it. We still haven't heard about his childhood, really, so there could be something going on there. But still, if this, so I don't know. But if this is true, well, one, again, like I was saying in the last video, I think, he's to blame if he didn't contact the authorities in that very second as soon as or at least soon after. So it's weird that he would, I don't know, if it's true, then it's true, and maybe he just didn't know what to do. And it's not common that parents will snitch on each other unless they're going through a divorce. I don't know. I just wonder if there's any sort of proof. And it'd be hard to find. I guess the other kids, but that's hard. I mean, other kids, it's really hard. You know, there are famous cases, many of them like this, where the kids are the only witnesses, the only potential witnesses, and that's a rough spot to be in as a child, right? Even if you're a child and you're like, yeah, my mom's abusive. I don't live with my mom anymore. I'm not afraid of her really, but she is my mom, and it's a lot easier for me to say, I don't know, I wasn't there. So I can't imagine that we're going to get any sort of corroborating evidence around this, unless Christine admitted it herself, I suppose.
Ow. Turn a camera on, turn a recorder on, and I palm my phone and hide it. And I start recording. How could you betray my trust? How could you do that? Right in front of me right now, you erase everything. Sky's the limit in terms of what actually happened. This could have actually happened. And if so, then my God. And then the other kids probably experienced similar things, at least in that direction. But if he's making this up, then my God. I don't know. I just don't know what to think. Reset phone, hit OK. Don't you ever do anything like that again. I never got rid of the phone. I specifically kept it my entire life, just in case someone was ever able to do a data recovery off of it and pull the video back.
Okay, so does he have that video? Because if he does, then that'll say something, but if he doesn't, then it all could just be a very clever, elaborate lie. Excerpts from actual social media exchange between Michael and Christine in 2013. So I'm guessing the documentarians have access to official records. I got one of you beating the holy freaking hell out of Natalia, so I got a video of you. When you tried to beat the truth out of her, I get it. I know you're a good person. Okay, what does that say? Does that say he was complicit, or is he just placating her? And that's not like you, but it got out of hand. She deserved it, but still. So that doesn't sound like placating. That sounds like at least complicit in that direction. She deserved it. I mean, if you're horrified by your partner beating the freaking hell out of your child, and you're trying to extract information, I suppose, or you're trying to appease, I don't know if you would say she deserved it. That wasn't necessarily necessary, but I don't know. And also, I don't trust the documentarians to edit this accurately, because sometimes they might take words out, or it might be of a different time, but I don't know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's a new year, so of course it's time for New Year's resolutions. But often, those are just manifestations of internalized harmful voices, voices that tell us we're not good enough. So instead of making a resolution to change something, let's recognize that we are already good enough. Now, most people think of therapy as a place for us to work on our problems, but there are several schools of thought within the field of psychotherapy that adamantly reject that paradigm, like narrative therapy and solution-focused. Instead, these clinicians help us focus on what we're already doing well. And by helping us do that, data shows that we often will gravitate towards more beneficial patterns. Well, one place you can find such therapists is on BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk. She says, whatever, she was very evil and you know it, she's a sociopath. Okay, evil, what's that? Apparently you were told by a clinician that she's a sociopath. I think they meant psychopath. And that doesn't mean that you have the right or the duty to beat the freaking hell out of the child. But I guess what this does demonstrate is evidence that she is agreeing with what he was saying earlier. If we're being presented an actual account here and it wasn't doctored in any way, which we can't know necessarily, then she's admitting to have beaten the freaking hell out of Natalia. And this also seemingly illuminates a dynamic between the two of them, because if she had said, well, you know, you beat her yesterday, and maybe he did, but you would think if something was happening like that, she would bring that up, but she's not. How dare you compare yelling at me to flip out on a criminal in my house impersonating a 3-year-old. Dare you compare? But I think the gist of what she's saying is that it's not wrong to beat a criminal in your house who's impersonating a 3-year-old. So don't criticize me for that. With the music and the precursor to this seemingly does implicate her, but it's hard to know because we could be being manipulated. There could be another side of the story, but this certainly doesn't look good for Christine. So this certainly this is potentially corroborating evidence for a lot of the things that Michael has been saying, which is interesting. You know, it's, I guess you watch these videos to watch me react. And so this is me reacting in that my brain is in a mode of like, okay, that sounds horrible, but wait, this is just his account. He's going through a divorce. Who knows what's going on here? He also was there, and he apparently never called the police during. So what does that say? So I don't know what's going on here. And then I see this, and although it's hard to know exactly what's being communicated here, it definitely starts. So I guess I'm reacting. I'm sifting through this right now, rewriting a lot of the past in terms of what I've seen. Because a lot of things Michael was saying, particularly about Christine, I'm like, well, it's hard to know. And I guess looking back to what we heard from the employees at that farm or creamery, and they were claiming that Christine was the one who was being violent, that the child was not, right? And then when Natalia was being interviewed, Natalia was saying, well, I fell because I needed different shoes, and then she fell. I don't know. But then Natalia, well, maybe that wasn't a moment where Christine was beating Natalia, and Christine was just being more verbal or something. I don't know. I'm trying to think, what else did we hear? I think Jacob said that Christine was very fixated about, like, tell me the truth. So seeing these texts, to me, these texts, and I could be being manipulated by the documentary or whoever presented these texts to the documentary crew or whatever, but
these texts push me in a direction pretty significantly to believing the story that Christine is indeed abusive, and also hell-bent on targeting Natalia, putting her up against the wall for 8 hours. Oh my God. Yeah, a lot of the allegations I've been like, well, I don't know. They've been going through a divorce and there's a lot of questionable things here. So I haven't really been absorbing the possibility. It's also kind of fantastical, right? I've been there and I've seen it and I've treated and I've heard the stories for sure. As a therapist, we all hear those stories, but my God, if all that is in the ballpark, my God, wow, awful. And maybe that's why Christine didn't want to be in the documentary, because she knows that there's evidence against her. So she's just avoiding the whole thing. And the two other boys, who I assume are almost adults now, they were like 3 and 6-ish in, I think, 08-ish. So 15 years ago. So yeah, they're adults. So hopefully they're okay now. I don't know if they were ever being abused in the first place. It'd be hard to imagine if Christine was abusive to Natalia, that she wasn't abusive, at least to some extent. I don't know. My goodness. This is interesting. I could see why people would want me to watch this documentary. I could also see why this is a popular documentary. Because how often do you get a story like Natalia, which is just fascinating in and of itself, and then you get this story about Christine, and then you get the way that Michael talks, the way he describes things, you know, it's quite a combination. Threatening and poisoning people and lying to get my husband to sleep in her room. To get my husband to sleep in her room. Is that related to what we saw or what we heard from, I mean, they sort of recreated it, you know, a recreation. The neighbors were talking about, so one of the neighbors had heard from another neighbor that Natalia had propositioned him in the laundry room.
This exchange between Michael and Christine is really an explosive revelation. Michael accuses Christine of beating Natalia, and she doesn't deny it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
You know, I can help and provide as much information about Christine as possible, and I don't know. I've watched too many TV shows, I suppose.
Now, none of this exonerates Michael. There's a possibility that he was just as abusive, but because Christine isn't speaking, and maybe she's speaking to lawyers, or I don't know. So, you know, it's hard to know what was going on with Michael. But it's also possible that Michael never physically abused anybody. Sometimes it's hard for society to wrap their head around the notion that you could have a woman, a wife, a mother, one, be that abusive, and two, be so abusive that her husband is terrified to tell anybody about it, terrified of his own wife, even though he might be bigger and stronger.
And so my mom denied possibly doing anything wrong, and if anything, she was just operating under the advice of therapists. And I can assure you that no therapist would advise this particular action, which I'm not going to go into detail. But.
Okay, so it looks like he's referring to physical violence, but we don't know that for sure unless he were to say that. But that does lend itself to the credibility of Michael's story.
Like if a therapist did, they would lose their license.
Interesting. Before a number of months ago, 6 months ago-ish, yeah, I would have totally agreed with Jacob that, of course, no therapist would recommend beating a child if they are out of line. But we saw with the Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt story that that isn't always the case.
I'm just definitely not 100% innocent. So I'm kind of stuck between like a rock and a hard place where like I don't want to hurt anyone. And I recognize that that might not be possible.
You could exonerate a little girl and set the record straight.
Okay, so what he has been saying, Jacob, he has been saying that he doesn't want to say what he knows happened in the house. I think particularly regarding Christine's behavior. I think he's been referring to the fact that Christine did in fact beat Natalia, but he hasn't said it directly, so we can't know. And he has been saying, look, you know, good people do bad things, bad people do good things, and I'm between a rock and a hard place here. I don't know what to say. And you could absolutely imagine that, right? From us on the outside and the producer, we're not in his shoes. And if you've ever been in these shoes, then you know. But if you haven't, then you might not know. We might look at him and say, like, look, you're an adult now. Why would you protect your mom? Why would you not say what actually happened, if in fact that's what he's doing? But when it's your parents, the parents that were good some of the time, it's hard to imagine, but even if Christine did do those things and more, there's a strong possibility that Jacob has a lot of warm, nice memories of his mom. Maybe a majority of memories are nice and warm. Not always. But even if they weren't nice and warm, all the memories or a lot of the memories, it's still your parent. And that's a very complicated relationship. I've worked with many, many clients who have had, from their description, some of the most horrific, abusive parents in the world. And yet they still long for love from their parents. They still have an affection for their parents. They still talk to their parents. So who are we to say that people are supposed to turn their back, that they're supposed to come out with the truth just because we want to know the truth?
One of my favorite sayings from Martin Luther King Jr., justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah, I need to sleep on some things.
It's the fear that if you tell us what it is that you know, that your mother is going to go to prison. So
they're really laying it on thick. And I don't like this. I think there's a limit to how much pressure you can put on. This isn't just asking someone to tell this random story that they heard about. This is asking a son, a young man, to basically put his mother in prison. And everything that, if he were to admit it, he would have to deal with in the future, that he would have the fallout in his family and his relationships. You know, maybe even the grandparents are involved in this somehow. He would have to go to trial and go to the witness stand. And you know, there's a lot at stake. It's not just this story that we consume in a documentary on a Sunday night.
Yeah, I don't know if I wish to talk about this further. I'm done.
Good for him. Yeah. And if he wants to come forward, then you know, he should be allowed to come forward on his own terms. He shouldn't be pressured into it. And good for him for just, instead of trying to wiggle out of the question, he just detects that, I think what's happening, he detects that he has a hostile interviewer that's not listening to him and really being judgmental. I mean, bringing up Martin Luther King Jr., wow. You know, she had that one in the chamber ready to fire at him. That didn't just come off the top of her head, I'm guessing. And instead of dancing around, he's just like, yeah, I'm done. I detect that you're against me and this is no longer viable. All right, well, that was rough. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.